Not to brag here, but I won this baby in 1991. Blue Springs Dragons. Might have heard of them? 91 was my rookie season and also my retirement from touch football because I cried every week. I hated it and begged my dad to let me quit, but he made me stick it out. If I didn't enjoy it, he said I didn't have to sign up again. Because even though he loves sports, Raymond Seals really wanted his son to learn a few lessons, which were finish what you start. Be a good sport. You're going to walk through that line at the end of every game and slap the hands whether you want to or not. Also, sell the candy bars. Sell the frozen pizzas. Just do it. About 15 million boys in America are in sports leagues, according to the CDC, but it's been declining. And I'm kind of wondering, is that good or bad? I've always thought of youth sports as this undiluted good, right? You have the physical activity and competition. I wish I were better at that. Teamwork and structure. You have goal setting, vigor. But the cost of participation are rising. The pressure and injuries and specialization also going up. Is it still beneficial when the fun disappears? Linda Flanagan spent almost 20 years coaching. She loves sports, but has a stark warning. Her book is titled Take Back the Game: How Money and Mania Are Ruining Kids' Sports and Why It Matters. Linda Flanagan, welcome to All Boy.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You are not here to dump on kids' sports. In fact, just the opposite, really. What's your main concern?
My main concern with sports is they've been corrupted by some external forces, namely, well, I have written a book about it, and it's basically three things. The money, youth sports have become an adult-centered activity rather than child-centered. They're really kind of more about adults at this point, both the profit centers who are building facilities and charging a fortune, and parents who get an ego boost. So that's one. There's a lot of money. The second is colleges. There's more of an incentive to play sports because there are advantages in college athletics. And third is the shift in parental views toward children, what parents owe their kids and what kids owe parents. And these factors have elevated the role of youth sports in kids' lives and family lives, for that matter, so that they've just taken on an disproportionate influence in kids, for kids, and again, also for siblings and parents as well.
And it might be beneficial to get a sense of where you come from. You're one of, is it 5?
Yes, 5 kids. Yep.
Okay. And in your family, what was the role of sports?
Yes. Okay. So I'm the youngest of 5, and we were raised my parents wanted us to play as much as we could. We'd throw balls around outside, and my mother, took us to the tennis courts in town to learn how to play. It was pretty casual. I joined a softball team when I was, I can't remember. I think it was 6th grade. That was like the earliest you could do it when I was growing up. There were no organized teams before that. But I was pretty good because I threw the ball around a lot in the yard, and I practiced. I loved sports, and I loved running, and I was good at it. So it was fine. By the time I was able to play on a team, I was good enough to play on a team. And I would say my parents had the view, and I think I've kind of adopted it, which is that athletics, they're a good way to keep yourself engaged, to be doing something that's basically good for you for the most part, that it's not everything, but you make a commitment to it, you strive to do better, and it's a good little like mini lab for what you're going to encounter later in life when you have a boss and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I've adopted. It's not everything, but it's important.
Which, with 5 kids, you're busy. With 2 kids, I feel like I've been run over by a Mack truck. So I can only imagine with 5 kids, which means also that by its nature, their time and resources are limited. They could not dedicate every moment to you playing sports.
No. Well, not only that, and I often think about it when I learn about what parents are doing now, not in a million years would they have dropped their lives for our athletics. They had their own stuff. They were busy. They were involved in their own activities. And not that they didn't, come to our games occasionally. And my father used to hit balls out in the street to us, but it didn't revolve around our athletics. It would have been impossible, for one thing, with 5 kids. I don't know. You have to hire out. You have to subcontract out the parenting, which of course many do. But there's just no way, because they had their own stuff, that would have been an imbalance in priorities, I think. And so it was off the table. And anyway, it wasn't an option because these kinds of things didn't exist when I was growing up.
I see.
So they didn't feel that pressure.
Yeah, so the parental cultural element of that, which we're going to get into more later, and what parents get out of it or what it takes from them, that's one of your prongs of concern. But let's start with the child. 35% of kids in America are overweight or obese, according to NIH, and that was 2019. So it's probably gone up even more since then. The number one thing folks probably think about with child sports is, yeah, get them out there, get them running, get them moving. That's a base good, right?
Yes. That is a base good. I certainly, at the same time, it's not that sports are necessarily the answer to the obesity crisis. They're a piece of it. It's great. The more kids move, the more they're not like sitting around, eating Doritos or whatever. Great. So that is one reason why we should be encouraging sports participation or exercise. I think sometimes there's a confusion about sports versus exercise, and we can get into that later. But
please, I'd love to know.
Okay, well, so a lot of the data that you read about sports, particularly this recent information about boys, about their participation rates dropping. The Aspen Institute reported it went from 50% to 41% of boys over a 10-year period ending in 2023. And other groups, the data is a little murky because people define playing sports differently. So, what does playing sports mean? You play 12 months of the year every day, or is it you shoot hoops in the driveway once a month? So depending on how you define it, the numbers vary. They vary greatly. So that Aspen number of 41% is the lowest, but
that's from Project Play, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And their numbers are very reliable. But if you look at it just at high school kids, there was the Youth Risk Behavior Survey had the number at 52% of high school boys play. So, okay. So, but I guess when I talk about sports versus exercise, I think sometimes I don't know that this includes, time that boys and girls, but more boys, because they're more apt to play in an unstructured setting. Okay, so maybe they're quitting the soccer team, but maybe they're going home and playing at the playground or in their yard. They're shooting hoops in the driveway. They're playing hide and seek, or depending on their age, that there are independent things you can do that are exercise. They could be running. Like when I was in high school, I quit the indoor track team. I didn't like it, but I went running every day anyway.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's really important when we're looking at this data about the drop in boys. What are they doing what are they quitting? What are they doing instead of that? That's really important, I think. And maybe it's athletic and maybe it's not, but
and maybe it's solitary and maybe it's not, because we'll get into team versus individual sports, but my concern would be them going from the field to their bedroom.
Exactly. Yes. Like that's obviously not good. Cocooning with their phones, or their TV. That's not good, obviously. But maybe it's not the worst thing in the world if they're going to work after school, or instead of playing for a team, or they're going for a run, or going to the gym. There's different ways of measuring sports participation that I think sometimes the data can obfuscate some of that.
I see. Yeah. So one column there, I guess, would be physical health, and then the other one would be mental health. And I'm going to get into mental disorders in a moment. But first, let's start with good here, if we can.
Okay.
There was this meta review, almost 3,700 studies in the International Journal of Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity, and it finds the number one measurable effect of participating in sports for boys was higher self-esteem. I mean, which to me strikes me as, okay, which I have a degree in psychology, so I do remember the thing from adolescent psych where they say the people who excelled before college end up going, a little disappointed with life afterward. But at a time where a lot of boys are either dissatisfied or disengaged, it seems like anything to boost their self-esteem at this moment might be a good thing.
Yeah, it's funny though, when you think about other times in history when we've tried to boost self-esteem, that has since been debunked. The telling kids they're good at everything and great job. That whole movement of building self-esteem in the absence of actual achievement, that kind of rings hollow for kids. But
I actually have from my baseball team, I brought my 1991 trophy, but I actually have another trophy which was from my baseball team, most sponsored, which meant I sold the most pizzas. Yeah.
And that built your self-esteem because you had actually done it.
I guess.
Well, see, now that's that meta-analysis you looked at. See, I think it's very clear that exercise and movement helps your mental health, like thwarts depression and relieves anxiety. Like there's very conclusive data on that about movement, even just walking. So I think sports can help with being on a team can help with that, but it's not clear to me if it's whether it's being on the team or it's exercising that makes kids feel better and being around other kids who like them and are happy that they're contributing to the team. Like that's great. It's just that so much of the data on sports is correlational. It's not, it's like, okay, well, these kids played sports and then 20 years later, they did better than the kids who didn't play sports. That's often what the studies suggest. But we don't know if it's the kids who were better equipped to manage life, or they were maybe a little more assertive or a little more aggressive. Maybe they're the ones who chose sports and that's why they did better. It's very hard to know what is cause and effect here. And it's the same with much of the data on girls' sports participation that, oh, well, girls who play sports, they don't get pregnant in high school, they don't drop out of school, they don't take drugs, all that wonderful stuff we associate with sports. And I don't want to shred that, but just to raise a note of caution that you really don't know if it's those particular girls are drawn to sports or they have those personal attributes that maybe they have a little more self-discipline, they're a little more ambitious. And so then, it's confusing causation and correlation.
Yeah, introducing a little muddiness into this, which it is important to talk about that of self-selection. I hadn't really given that much thought. Can I say that back to you? Because it sounds like what you're saying is if you have a boy, let's say he has 3 or 4 good friends and they're super into Dungeons and Dragons and they get to exercise creativity and create games and have that connection. Or a girl's in Babysitter's Club. I don't know, that springs to mind. But you have these connections, you have some level of responsibility and engagement that might be as good for you as being on a team.
Well, yes. I mean, the data is clear about unstructured play, for example. So for young kids, they are better off doing the unstructured play. And I'm not sure at what age that tips over into they'd be better off doing organized sports, or if there even is an age. But having unstructured play without adults sitting on their shoulder telling them, they stepped out of bounds or, you broke the rules, but having kids of different ages playing together, setting the rules, that is what is the authorities like Peter Gray at Boston College, Lenore Skenazy, this is what builds confidence and a sense of agency and competence in the world. And I'm not saying you can't get that from organized sports, but it's very clear that comes from unstructured play. So I always want to caution, yes, organized sports can be great for kids, but they're not the only way to learn about leadership and, discipline. If you have a job after school, all of those things matter too. Being able to walk to school by yourself independently, these other skills that children can develop also play a role, which isn't to say sports aren't important and great if you love them and they're fun and you're good at them. But if you don't love them and they're not fun and you're not good at them, And I don't think persisting in that is to anyone's advantage.
Well, and we know kids can develop those skills because that innovation is kind of how it was until relatively recently.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, kids' sports used to be child-centered, child-directed. It was focused on recreation and fun. And it's moved to adult structured, built on, with the main goal being skill development. And that's a very different kind of entity than what kids used to have. And as a result, one of the things we're seeing is kids are quitting a lot more. Boys especially, which, we wanted to talk about, but that most kids quit by 13 because it's just not fun anymore. They don't see a future in it, or, they're not going to make varsity, so they might as well quit.
Right. Plus the money. It is incredibly expensive. I know people here in Washington, D.C., great jobs, a lot of money. They spend every dime they have on equipment, on teams, on uniforms, on travel every weekend. And it's all with this, I don't know, fuzzy payoff somewhere in the future. And I'm thinking, are you sure you want to do that? You don't seem happy.
Well, it's very hard to resist that pull or that push. It's not sure which. I think Jonathan Haidt calls it conformity attraction. Everybody else is doing this. It's like, well, I guess we should be doing travel across too, even though it's like devouring our budget and every minute of free time, and our kids' siblings are left at home or with a babysitter. It just becomes really hard to resist, but it is so expensive and so time consuming that, I do think parents are going to push back against this a little bit when, I hope they do anyway. I mean, it's great for some kids. I always want to say like the high end sports are great for some kids, but the majority of kids are not going to go to college. They're not going to play sports in college, let alone get a scholarship. There's not going to be some big payout at the end of the rainbow here. Like, it's a little reminder that 6 to 7% of high school athletes play sports in college.
6 to 7%?
And that's of high school athletes, not of high school students.
Wow.
2% of high school athletes get any money. And that, like, not everybody gets a full ride. It's 0.3%. It's very, very, it's a fingernail's worth of kids who get a full scholarship. I mean, and some do, of course, some do. But it's if you're banking on that, I don't think your odds are very good. You're better off putting your money in an index fund and encouraging your child to have fun and play and be active and get involved in things, but not necessarily devote every waking hour to a sport.
Well, and you've made the point that the biggest predictor of who plays in college is a lot of times if their parents played in college. And it's just so funny because this, this misplaced hope of my child's going to do this. It reminds me of, you see these parents put their toddlers in pageants, or every parent seems to think their child is a model. I wanted to be Jonathan Taylor Thomas. You're not going to be. Most of you are not going to be the Venus, and Serena Williams sisters. That's just not going to happen.
Yes, I know. But yes. And when you say that, though, you sound like a real, Grinch, or, you just don't have faith. And I feel like it's like counting on winning the lottery, really. And in my view, like, if parents would be much better off just stepping back and letting their kids figure it out. And if they're going to be really great, and there are some kids who are really great, right, and if they really want it, then they'll find a way to make it. They'll get there. But it's not anything that we parents are doing, because here's another little fun fact that this is a study from 2016 by Travis Dorsch at the Families and Sport Lab at Utah State. The more parents spend on their kids' sports, the more pressure kids feel and the less they enjoy it. Oh. So there's, this inverse relationship between parental expenditure and kids' enjoyment. For all these reasons, I think it doesn't make sense to bank on investing in your child's athletics with the thought that it's going to pay off somehow in the future.
Now, if they are involved, and again, a lot of us would love our children to be involved, but to a degree that's healthy and that they want to be and they're enjoying it. And if they're going to make those decisions, we should make them wisely, perhaps. Let me read this. This also comes from Project Play. Team versus individual sports, a big difference in outcome. You have something like tennis, wrestling, that's a very individualistic sport. Anxiety, depression, withdrawal are actually higher than the average child. But team sports lower anxiety and depression by 10%, according to this 11,000 participant study on PLOS. 19% lower on depression withdrawal, 17% lower on social problems, 20% lower on rule breaking behavior, which I don't get because all the athletes I knew in college drank so much and went wild on days that they weren't playing. But, you know, I guess on the field, they learned how to follow the rules.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, the athletes on teams do tend to drink more, especially in suburban area, wealthy areas. It's the athletes who are the big drinkers.
Really? So overall, though, I should say, sounds like team sports, yes. Individual sports, yellow light.
Yes, I would say, again, some of those studies, it's correlation. It's not causation. We don't know. You just to have a little note of skepticism about it, that I think it's entirely dependent on the team.
Oh, like someone who says, I want this to all be within my control. I want to rely on myself getting to the ball. I rise and fall by myself. That personality who maybe seeks out tennis could be fundamentally or materially different from someone who winds up on a soccer team.
Well, that could certainly be. I played tennis, and I played in individual sports too, like tennis, and it was awful, and I hated it. in part because of that, being the solitary person and all the pressure on you. But what I meant by the team sport having a better outcome, I think it really is entirely dependent on the team, the coach, the setting. So it's not like I wouldn't want, even though they have generalized about it, I think you really have to look at the individual sport. Like if you have a great coach and a great culture, then I think that can have a very, very positive effect on kids, like higher self-esteem, lower anxiety. And if you integrated, like again, a great coach can have a big impact, making people feel connected, important, they're making a contribution, whether they're the best or the worst, that the other teammates it's a healthy environment. Like that's wonderful. But if you have a rotten coach and a poisonous team environment, then it's not going to be great. And you're much better off being on the running team, which is individual. So I know that they're drawing that conclusion, but I think that, I think it's much more case dependent.
Okay. Which, I mean, having coached for almost 20 years, I think you have 3 children, right?
Yep. 3 kids.
Yeah. And you coached for almost 20 years. You've had coaches. I've asked people in the field of education this about teachers, of what would you look for in a teacher for your child? What would you look for in a coach for your child?
Yeah. I would look for a coach who had kids, because I think they understand better what kids are like. I would look for someone, the traits I would look for are openness, kindness, an ability to communicate. Because some of those are the things that really fall apart. Communication skills are kind of often the leading cause of fractures between coaches and parents, because parents have different expectations. The coach doesn't communicate. Well, we're actually not going to play everybody, but kind of like the qualities, like I like you, like you're nice, your smile. I can tell you're a nice person. Like that's what I would like in a coach. Someone who can relate to the kids, who is a kind person, obviously knows the sport, but it's the traits of the person that matter more than the ability, than the actual athletic skills, in my opinion. Youth sports, that's what we're talking about, youth sports.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
I totally agree with that. My sons, they're loosely on a soccer team, but we spend a lot of weekends away, and they're 5.5. But most of the coaches are dads who happen to love soccer, who have been trained, but oh my gosh, are they patient? And when my sons punch each other and run off the field and cry when they don't get the thing, and they are so patient. And I always think, first of all, God bless you, but also you're giving him a little bit of time to figure out in the future, am I good at this? Because if you shut someone down too early on the field, just as in a classroom, that can kind of ruin it forever.
Yes, yes. Like so many kids are quitting because it's been ruined early. That's why in my view, the best coaches, youth coaches, are really like they want to make it fun so the kids will want to keep doing it.
Hmm.
You don't have to be a fantastic soccer coach, but if you make it fun for the kids so that they enjoy it and they feel like you see them, then they're going to want to keep doing it. And that's
Yeah.
the goal. Just keep doing it and you'll continue to develop. And if you stay through puberty, that's when things really happen.
Mm.
Before then, it's just about having fun and kind of developing some loose skills and making friends. But it's after puberty, that's when all bets are off. That's when the real ability becomes apparent. When
I
kids have
see.
reached their height, basically their adult height, and they're starting to develop muscles and all that. But if you get rid of so many kids earlier because, the coach was a jerk when they're 9 years old and then they quit and they say, I'm not any good at soccer. And that child may never develop into the soccer player he or she could have been.
Right. So when you get to that fork, then some kids might say, I want to stick with it. And a lot of kids say, I want to quit. When do you know to let them quit?
I just had this question at another event I did the other day, and I felt like I couldn't answer it very well. And I've thought about it some, and I think this is another one where it depends entirely on the child.
Mm.
Because some kids, I imagine your kids are different. Some of them, when they want to quit, the first sign things aren't great. Like, it wasn't fun, I'm going to quit. Others are much
Yes.
more willing to stick it out. And I think if you have a child who is always wanting to quit, that you have to kind of nudge them a little bit or say, okay, well, we're going to make it
Right.
through the season. You don't have to go back. We got to make it through the season. The kid who has played for years maybe and isn't happy about going to practice, or it's just not, you can see there's not the enthusiasm and they say they want to quit, then I think ending the season is always a good idea, provided there's no abuse. That is an automatic quitting situation.
Sure.
But it really does depend on the child. But for the most part, I think letting them quit, it shouldn't be treated like a massive failure when they're children and they don't want to do something anymore. It's like, okay, there's other things they can do.
Yeah. Drama club or babysitters club. I guess. So let's get to the adult side of this then. Real quick before we get to parents, you talked about money. Who is making all the money from these sports?
That is a very good question. It's mainly the biggest earners are it's the travel industry, because that's where
Mm.
most of the money, most of parental spending goes into travel. It's the hotels,
Mm.
it's the cost of, registration. Parents have sometimes to pay to watch their kids play. This is what
What?
I've been hearing about more and more lately. So, registration for a big tournament at Disney World, that's going to cost a fair amount of money. And then, of
Sure.
course, you got to put yourself up. So, Disney makes a fair amount of money. Um,
So is this a conspiracy? Is this a racket of some sort, or what do you mean by that? Because I'm sure American Airlines benefits, but they're not running this, are they?
well, they're not running it, but that in my book, it was so interesting learning about Disney's Wide World of Sports
Sports, yeah.
complex that they built that in 1997, and it was a deliberate strategy to put heads in beds, as they put it, because they were trying to hold on to they were losing the teenage demographic. Teenagers don't like the Magic Kingdom. So they built this with the thought that maybe this will get teenagers to come back to Disney World so that they would then stay at the hotels and generate profit. I mean, that's what Disney is, a for-profit company. That's what they are trying to do. So they did. It worked. It worked better than they could have
Yeah.
possibly imagined. And then other communities did the same thing, built these complexes. And it's brought tax dollars into cities as well, because they come and they go to some random city that has a big complex and they spend the night and they spend money in the city. So it's become a way to generate income for various tax dollars and income.
I see. If you build it, they will come and they will pay big
Exactly.
bucks.
Exactly.
Okay. How about, go ahead. Did you want to say something else?
Well, I was just going to say, parents, they feel like they're denying if their child makes is invited to a tournament in Disney World. Well, they're only going to be 9 once. How
Yes.
can I deny them the opportunity to play
Yep.
in the 9 and under championship at Disney World? It just seems like this is the kind of thing you should be doing when you're a parent. This is what good parents do. They don't deny their kids these opportunities. So parents are then forking out all this money and
And a
feeling
lot
like
of times
it's necessary.
going into debt, I'm sure too.
Yes, going into
Yeah.
debt.
Parents. So a thread of that is you don't want to rob your child. You want to give them every single opportunity, sometimes one that you didn't have. Um, Moms, I don't know, the moms I hear talk about this, many times it's just that they're really proud and they kind of feel like I'm I don't know what to, not tiger mom, but really proud mom of their
Yes,
sports child. And
yes.
then the dads seem to kind of be wearing the uniform as well, and it's kind of like you're not in the game. What are parents getting out of this? Because they complain a lot, but they do this a lot.
I know. Well, see, that to me is the most interesting part of the whole story of youth sports and the explosion in youth sports, because it's also true of other things. There's also been, the dance moms and the theater dads and theater parents and just this there has been this growth in concerted cultivation of children. And it's for a variety of reasons. Like family size has shrunk. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of economic anxiety. This is sort of beginning in the 70s. And these are like vague kind of amorphous cultural factors that have shifted how parents kind of view their kids and what they expect from their kids and what they think they have to do. So because family size has shrunk, each child is more precious. There's all this worry about how they're going to turn out because the economy, only now everything's so chaotic. What the hell is the world going to be like? How are they going to be
Mm-hmm.
prepared? And stranger danger. Now we can see every awful thing that's happening to any child around the world. It's right there in our pocket, and we can see. And then
Yeah.
the fear of these things happening
So don't go outside.
don't go outside. And God forbid you walk alone to school. That would be
Yes.
terribly dangerous, even though in fact we're a lot safer. Our children are a lot safer than we were when we were growing up, or certainly than I was. So these factors have converged and made parents think they have to put so much time and money into their children to keep them safe, to cultivate those skills so they'll be ready to take on the market when they graduate from college. And, the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who's no longer Surgeon General, but in August, he came out with this advisory for parents saying that parents are having a mental health challenge. And it's because they feel so much pressure. I think it was like 48% feel overwhelmed. That's certainly what I see in the young parents I know. They have to do everything.
Totally.
They have to pay for everything. They have to be everywhere all at once.
I feel that way. Yeah.
You have to be on the floor reading to them and playing Legos. And no, there's nothing, any sacrifice is worth it because because that shows what a good parent you are.
Yes.
And you can imagine with sports when there are all these opportunities to help them get a batting coach, let's pay up for the mitt. There's just all these opportunities to show that you really love your kids. And I know it is grounded in love for the most part, but then with sports especially, I think it becomes, and I was a sports parent. I had a son who's a very good player. It becomes kind of like tied to your own ego and tied to your own identity. When they're good, you just feel like, wow, I am pretty special for having created that little basketball star out there. And just like, it feels like a reflection on you. And I don't know any parent I can't believe any parent would deny that because it is so apparent. And when your child doesn't do well, it's kind of a bummer and you feel a little embarrassed. So that's the kind of the pernicious streak in youth sports, in that when parents are so deeply invested in both in time, in money, and in their own sort of self-worth, it takes away from what the value of the sport itself. But for the kids, So, I mean, the kids should not be playing sports because it makes mom and dad happy.
No.
That's not why they should be doing it. So it's, anyway, that's how we've gotten to this point where it's parent involvement has become, while some is necessary and good, there's by and large too much of it, in my view.
And viewers might be tired of hearing me talk about this, but when you're talking about the timeline there of how it went from families had 5 children to now, then it went to 3, and then now it's like 2 or 1.62 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not very high. This also seems to coincide with less religiosity, that people are spending less time at church, that families are not cohering in those places in those ways, and instead it's let's go to the volleyball game instead. I don't know.
Well, and I used to say, because I was a serious runner for a long time, most of my life, and I used to say on Sunday mornings, sorry, church interferes with my run. Like I had to get my run done. Sorry, like priorities. And and that is true that there are more and more sports activities on Sundays like there didn't used to be.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, Kmart wasn't open on Sundays, and you definitely didn't have a baseball game on Sundays, but I saw one yesterday morning, which was Sunday, and I thought, what in the world, guys? But, it is.
And Mother's Day and all this, and they try to mollify parents by they give like a red carnation to all the mothers in the stands, so they feel,
At least make it a tulip, a carnation. What? Okay, a man picked that one out. All right. Real quick, I was curious, Linda, any thoughts on sports betting? Because the numbers in sports betting and the engagement by young men in this, some people are really enthused by it, and some people are a little concerned about it. As people, I mean, maybe they're not playing sports, but they're playing in a different way and kind of gamifying it.
Well, I mean, I think it's appalling. I think the ease at which anyone can lose their money with, just stroke of the fingers on the phone, I think is appalling and terrible. And it's going to have to be rolled back some. I heard, I can't remember the guy's name. He was a big basketball player. He wrote a book a year or so ago. And he was talking about his gambling. He became a gambling addict. And he said it took him 20 years to lose his money because he had to go to the track and bet on the horses. So it just took time. With mobile sports betting, he said you can lose it like that. So it just plays on, it just allows people to do dumb things. It invites people to do dumb things very easily. And, terrible things that can have these disastrous effects. I think it's terrible for people who are gambling, who have no control, and for the players who get caught up in it. I mean, we're going to see more and more of this. The players.
You talk about who doesn't have impulse control, young men, especially.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just, I can't fathom how that, well, I should, but how it passed. Like what was the rationale for this? That it's going to create some kind of wonderful revenue for education, and then they'll, dress it up. It's going to help youth sports. In New York State, they did this. They allowed sports betting, and the well-intended will take a percentage of the proceeds and invest in youth sports and communities. Well, the limited data we've seen so far about how this is affecting people suggests that it's been a terrible idea. Terrible idea.
Wow. Let's finish here if we could. And I wanted to just talk about achievement culture, because we all want to succeed in our lives, and we all want our children to succeed. That might be looking a little different than it used to. My parents, they just kind of said, follow your dreams, do your best. And that was that. A lot of the folks I know here in Washington, D.C., I mean, you start plotting out where kindergarten's going to be, and then where they're going to go to middle school, high school, the scores, the resume. And it's just too much. Personally, I don't care. As long as my sons can make a living and be happy, that's what I care about. Where are we going with this achievement culture? Well,
the funny thing is, as we have gotten more wrapped up in, more concerned about test scores and more U.S. News and World Report rankings and where the colleges are, and just obsessive the way you're describing it, the worse kids are doing with their mental health. and with their overall sort of preparation for life. I mean, and I think, the youth sports culture is a part of that. And this is why, like, if we can kind of roll it back and say, well, unstructured play, let kids do more of that. Let them develop those skills that you want them to have as adults. Start developing them when they're younger by not orchestrating everything for them and making sure they don't ever fail and letting them, skin their knees a few times. I mean, see, the other thing I think about achievement culture is where you live, where I live, and where I grew up. If you as a parent can play it down and say, I love you, I want you to learn, like not only getting A's, I want you to learn. And of course I want you to do well and to enjoy your education, enjoy your activities. And I also want you to get to sleep, and you're not going to stay up past midnight finishing your homework. Sorry. Oh, well, it's more important to me that you get your sleep, that you have a good dinner, that have friends, that things are going well for you, than that you spend all weekend doing XYZ to advance your resume. The reason, if you can do that as a parent, your kids are surrounded by it anyway. They're inhaling this from all their peers and all their peers' friends. This, it's in the air that they've got to do well. You don't have to add to it as a parent. You can be the one to say, hey, forget it. Skip your homework tonight. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Like, everything seems so important to kids, and they get a B or a C on a quiz. It's like the end of the world. Mm-hmm. Like, that's crazy. It's crazy. And it encourages this unwillingness to take risks. You don't want to take risks if you're a kid, because if you get a B or a C, oh my God, your future, you're never going to get into Duke.
And you don't want to disappoint anyone,
Yeah, there's just, somehow we have to find a way to ratchet that down,
Yeah.
Oh, I have a good example for you too. In sports, there's now this tracking of athletes. So they're on Mile Split, which is a big database, basically, that keeps track of people's scores and times. Every athlete who competes has what did I call it? Mile Split page, and it's public. So there are kids who don't want to, like a sophomore, they don't want to try doing the high jump. Say the coach wants them to try to do the high jump or do the hurdles. They don't even want to try because their time or their place is going to be recorded on Mile Split. Meanwhile, nobody cares, of course. Nobody cares what some random kid's high jump.
Although that's what I do with my connections on New York Times. I'm like, I am not pushing this button time. No, I got it. Because, I get that.
So it's that kind of, unwillingness to take risks. The fear of failure is just so destructive.
Yeah. And I like what you said about parents, because my mom, I grew up in, Blue Springs, Missouri, as evidenced by my trophy. And in the morning, if Sally Jesse was good, we were going to school 30 minutes late because we had to finish it. That's just how it was. Yeah. And we made it. We made it.
Right. That's it. I mean, I just think it's really harmful to kids to give them the impression that everything they do is so important. And this is what Lisa D'Amour, I don't know if you know of her, the author and psychologist, she's really wonderful. One of her bits of advice is kids need to have activities they do that don't count, that don't matter. That's not like, whether it's cooking or it's sewing or whatever it is, taking care of animals, something that doesn't count. They're not being graded, they're not being scored, just where the pressure comes off so that they can have some space to just kind of be alive and not be feeling this pressure to achieve in everything.
I love this. A way to improve childhood, whether you're playing sports or not. If you are, let's optimize it for it being constructive. There's so much to think about. If people want to learn more, Take Back the Game. It's an awesome book.
Thank you.
Linda Flanagan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What do you think? Have kids' sports become too crazed in our hyper-competitive world? Children follow their parents' lead, so what do we need to change? And again, honestly, I don't know the answer to this. I'm torn on whether I should commit to a full season given the requirements, because I think my kids might benefit and like it, but also take away from stuff we enjoy. Share your thoughts below. Subscribe also, All Boy, on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. You can find more at allboyallgood.com. I am Chance Seals, the Blue Springs Dragon. See you soon.